These are 5 dark horse wide receivers who could finish as the wide receiver 1 overall in fantasy football. Starting at number 5, Drake London. He's had a tough start to his career with only 6 total touchdowns over his first 2 years. And I think a lot of that we can blame on his poor quarterback play, whether it's been Marcus Mariota, Desmond Ridder, a little bit of Taylor Heineke sprinkled in. Last year, the Falcons quarterbacks were 4th lowest in adjusted completion rate and 3rd lowest in catchable target rate. A lot of the blame also has to go on Arthur Smith, who was a horrendous head coach for Atlanta. I am so glad for my Bijan, Drake London, Kyle Pitts shares that he is finally gone. I honestly don't understand how he has a job in the NFL. I don't get it. Drake London gets a huge upgrade at quarterback with Kirk Cousins coming from Minnesota. I think Kirk is an elite quarterback. He's obviously a massive upgrade. It just keeps getting better. Newly acquired offensive coordinator Zach Robinson, who's coming from the Rams. We know what that passing attack looked like last year, with Puka Nacua breaking several NFL rookie records. And the icing on the cake, Raheem Morris is the new head coach, and he's already come out and said how much he wants to get the ball to Bijan Robinson, and for this video, Drake London. I think London has a little bit of a bad rap because of the horrible situations that he's been in through the first 2 years, but London, 6'4" wide receiver, big bodied frame, wild catch radius. He's actually a better route runner and strong separator than people think. And it's just honestly going to be the perfect storm with Kirk Cousins, finally a quarterback who can get London the ball. Don't be surprised at all if Drake leads the NFL in receiving touchdowns. I honestly don't even think that's a hot take. I think that could very likely happen. To the next receiver, Marvin Harrison Jr. Do I really need to tell you how good MHJ was at OSU? All right, well, whatever. I'm going to tell you anyways, so listen up. His final 2 years at Ohio State, 144 receptions, 2,474 receiving yards with 28 touchdowns. And yeah, you could say his junior year he had CJ Stroud. Senior year he did not have an elite quarterback, and he still got it done. MHJ has a special skill set possessing size, finesse. He has elite ball skills. He's a special route runner. He's honestly primed to lead the Cardinals in all major receiving categories. The only person he really has to compete for targets with this year is Trey McBride, which, don't get me wrong, I love McBride. He's my tight end 1 right now in redraft. Outside of that, there's not really anyone else that's going to be a major threat. While we don't see many rookie receivers have top 12 finishes or wide receiver 1 overall finishes, it's definitely not impossible. Puka Nacua was wide receiver 6 last year in fantasy points per game. Jamar Chase, his rookie year, wide receiver 5. I think another reason why I'm so high on Marvin Harrison Jr. is because I love Kyler Murray this year. He's my dark horse to finish as the QB1 overall. He's going as, I believe, the quarterback 9 on underdog drafts. That's an absolute value. I want as much Kyler in redraft as possible. I want all 3 guys, McBride, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Murray, as much as possible in fantasy this year. Kyler is now fully healthy. I think he gets back to 2020 form where he had 37 total touchdowns. To my next receiver, we have Chris Olave. He's coming off an interesting year. When you zoom out and look at the big picture numbers, it's not pretty. It's disappointing. But if you dig a little bit deeper, he set career highs in targets, receptions, receiving yards, and fantasy points per game. And I really think Derek Carr injuring his shoulder in week 3 really put this offense on a downward spiral. As Carr had the 6th highest checkdown rate, we saw it. He was constantly targeting Alvin Kamara. It seemed like his first read was Kamara. And I think a lot of that, most of that, was because of his injured shoulder. Derek Carr is not one to sit and miss time. He's going to play through the pain. But that really affected Olave. He was not willing to take those deep shots downfield. And I honestly think it's going to be a different story this year because Carr's shoulder is healthy. And they bring in new offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak. Kubiak was just with the San Francisco 49ers, and in 2021, he was the offensive coordinator for Minnesota, where the Vikings ranked 14th in scoring offense and 13th in offensive yards. So we know Kubiak is going to improve this offense, and I think he's really going to focus on pushing the ball downfield and getting the ball into his best player's hands on offense, which is Chris Olave. At number 2, we have Puka Nacua, who was wide receiver 6 in fantasy points per game, We know the spectacular year that he's coming off, reeling in 105 receptions for 1,486 receiving yards. Both of those numbers are NFL records. Even after Cooper Kupp returned last year from injury, Puka still led the duo in target share, yards per route run, air yard share, and fantasy points per game. So now that we got that out of the way, in terms of Puka, a lot of it rides on Matthew Stafford's age and health. Because if Matthew Stafford gets hurt, we know that it's going to be an obvious downgrade for Puka. That being said, last year was not a fluke for Puka Nacua. He's a very, very talented receiver. All the advanced metrics are screaming that he's only getting better. He's just getting started. And to my final receiver, it's Garrett Wilson, right? It's obvious. Like, Garrett Wilson should have broke out last year. Aaron Rodgers gets injured 4 plays into week 1. And everyone who invested early and heavily, myself included in Wilson, was heartbroken. And he had a disappointing, terrible, awful, whatever adjective you want to use season. And while Wilson finished with 95 receptions for over 1,000 yards, he didn't pay off at where he was being drafted, which was a late first, early second round pick last year. One of those reasons was he wasn't scoring touchdowns. He had 3 receiving touchdowns on the year, and he had Zach Wilson throwing him the football for most of the season, which we know how that turned out. The Jets quarterbacks last year, mainly Zach Wilson, ranked 27th in catchable target rate and 30th in adjusted completion rate. But it's a brand new year. We have a healthy Aaron Rodgers coming off a torn Achilles at 40 years old. I mean, come on, what could go wrong? While there is still some risk with drafting Garrett Wilson this year because a lot rides on Aaron Rodgers, the upside is just too good to pass up. So when deciding if you want to draft Garrett Wilson this year, you have to weigh the risk reward. I'm all in. I'm going back to the well. I'm not ever betting against Hall of Fame quarterback Aaron Rodgers. I don't care about his age. I don't care about the injury that he's coming off. And one thing that does give me some comfort is that Zach Wilson is not on the roster. So God forbid if Aaron Rodgers does get injured again, we don't have to deal with Zach Wilson. We have Tyrod Taylor, who gets injured often himself, but if he is in there, he is healthy. He's a capable quarterback that can still probably not give Garrett Wilson that top 5 wide receiver 1 overall upside, but he'll be serviceable enough where he could still be a borderline wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2. I can't wait to see Rodgers and Garrett Wilson absolutely shred the league this year. That's all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.